Welcome back, everyone, and welcome, Megan. So glad to have you on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Sally. It's always great to chat with you.
So I introduced your role, but basically you're in charge of ArborBridge, which is a test prep company, correct?
Yes, we do tutoring for all of the exams, for academics, for APs, IBs, and the big one, the SAT, which we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, exactly. So the SAT has changed. It's coming, which, it's like further layer of complexity to the admission process, along with test optional. So yeah, relying on you, what kind of changes are coming? Let's start with that.
Yeah, so the test is going to be changing in the coming years, and we could talk about that timeline in a second. But really, there's going to be a major shift in the feel of the test when a student takes it on test day. And the biggest shift is it's moving from paper to computer. And that is sort of a sea change for the SAT and for college admissions. But we've been having computer-based tests for a long time, and others, GRE, GMATs, ICs, all of those have been computer-based for a little bit while. But sort of what it's going to feel like for a student is you're going to go to the test center. It's not going to be taken at home, because there were questions whether or not, can I now take this at home online? That's not going to happen. You'll still go to a test center. You can bring your own computer, or you can use one that is provided by the test center or the college board at the test center. You'll pull up in your device. You're going to download a testing app onto your computer, and you're going to take the entire test inside that testing app. And so what you'll see is the questions will show up, the passages on the screen, your bubble sheet is right there on the screen too, and you just submit your answers through there. So that's kind of what the experience will be like. But I think the biggest thing everybody is super excited about is it will be shorter. We're going from 3 hours to 2 hours. So that's a big win for students. And the other thing my students are very excited about is you can now use your calculator on all the math again. That was something that 5 years ago went away. They had some questions with calculator and some without, but they heard you loud and clear, students out there and tutors who are dependent on calculators, which I will say I am one of them. And the calculator is back in play.
Well, it just feels like so easy to make that dumb mistake without a calculator. It's easy even with a calculator, but even easier without. So, well, thank goodness for that. I will say that I took tests like that when I was in graduate school recently, where I brought my computer, downloaded a particular program, and it was actually really nice to be taking it on my computer. Even if a student has a computer, I think that's a plus. It's like an extra level of comfort.
Absolutely. It's the same thing we talk about when we talk to students about the calculator you take in, even now to the test. Use the one you use every day in school that you're really comfortable with. And we're going to suggest to students that if you have a computer that you can take to the exam, you should opt for that over the computer that's provided at the test center for exactly the same reason. You're comfortable with it. You know how the mouse clicks, you know all the buttons, and it feels just it's one fewer thing to think about on test day.
Exactly. So when are these changes happening? Like, when is all this coming?
Okay, so it's not happening tomorrow, so no one has to panic yet, which is good. They've given us a little bit of a heads up. Most of these changes are starting. The first set of changes will be a year from now in the spring. So next March, 2023, international students will move to the computer-based test. Then in fall 2023, so a year and a half from now, the PSAT for all students, US, international, will move to the digital interface. And then US students, who I think are most of the people who are listening probably today, are spring 2024. So for US students, it's 2 years away. So the one way to kind of think about this is, if you are a senior or junior right now, ignore this. This is not you. You do not need to think about this. You've got other things to think about and worry about. Just move on. For sophomores, if you live outside of the United States, yes, this will be something that will affect you and affect your SATs. But for the US kids, also, ignore this. This is not happening to you. It's really the freshmen, class of 2025, whether they're in the US or abroad, you will have a PSAT on the computer and you will have an SAT on the computer.
Okay. All right. So how is the content of the test going to change? I mean, I know it's going to be shorter, but what else is going to be different?
So there's really one small change that some students will notice and some students might not, is that on the math section, we talked about the calculator change, but they're also going to make the questions less wordy, which a lot of students actually really like. Is right now they don't like to go through the long word problem that sets up a problem. And now you can kind of get right to the meat and get right to the math. The biggest change, though, is going to be in the reading section. So currently, when they open the reading section, you get a long passage, almost a whole page worth of text, and then you get 10 questions about that passage. And the SAT says, you know what, we're going to stop doing that. What we're going to do instead is you're going to get snippet, small, short passages with one question each, and you're going to get more time per question. So the pace will be a little bit more comfortable, and you're going to get those shorter passages. Now, I will say, as a test prep expert, just a tip out there is most people hear that and be like, yes, this sounds amazing. I'm going to be so good at this. And in some ways it is good, because if you hit one hard passage now, it hurts you for 10 questions. But what's nice about this is you get one hard passage, it only hurts you once. But on the flip side, with a shorter passage, it's fewer textual clues to point you to the right answer. So you got to be a little bit better at picking up the point of the passage and what's going on a little bit more quickly.
So it's going to be less tiring, but yeah, you might think you're doing really well when you're not. It's funny, I'm listening to all this and I'm like, I might not have done as well in this version, because I was really good at like those long textual passages. I swear that's why I did well on the test, because I did not study like other people. I didn't, but I'm just a really good close reader and always have been. So that was just my skill set, you know. But all right, so that's pretty interesting. And I think most students, at least the test itself, will be a little less painful for them. So I think that's really good. Now, there's also been talk about the exam being adaptive. And so let's dig into what that means. I mean, I can see how this could be so much better for students who have particular learning challenges. Maybe they've got ADD or whatever it might be, that there are ways to adapt it. Is that true, or am I imagining that?
No, you're absolutely right. For students with accommodations, this is really helpful. So ADHD, like you said, it can really help to have these smaller, shorter passages, to have a test that requires less endurance. And actually that is helpful for anyone, even those of us who like taking these tests. A shorter test is not a bad thing. It also, for students with accommodations who might have extra time, who have double time, you know, a 3-hour test quickly becomes a 6-hour test. And that is a marathon to ask a student to do. Even I would really struggle with that. So there are definitely the upsides, but I think one thing to kind of cover is talk about, what does this actually mean to be adaptive? And the adaptive nature is how they are making it shorter. So what this does is that basically the computer is analyzing how a student's performing as they're moving through the material. And so what the computer can do is can be actively zeroing in on their right score. And what that means is that the test doesn't take as long. And so what we think so far, based on what the College Board has said about this SAT, is how they plan to make it adaptive. And there's lots of ways to make an adaptive test, but the primary way they're going to do it is that each section, so if you get a math section, say, will be divided into 2 modules. The first module will be a basic set of questions that everybody gets, or that is sort of medium level difficulty. And it's going to zero in on, do you need harder level difficulty, medium level, or lower level difficulty, based on how you perform on that first module. And then your second module will kind of bump you to your level to further zero in on that score. Now, one thing that I would say about this is that this changes a lot how the test will feel. One way is that you do have to train yourself to really be strong right out of the gate. You can't sort of wait to find your groove. You really have to move into that module and put your best foot forward. The other thing is you'll have to manage, and this is something where students with learning differences, or students with diagnosed test anxiety might struggle a little bit, because it does put a lot more pressure on those first few questions. And so you'll have to learn to manage that anxiety as you're moving through. But I will say that because adaptive testing has been around for a long time, many of us in the testing industry, I know we, the experts at ArborBridge, have prepared students for this before. We know how to do this and how to manage all of those new factors.
Okay. Yeah, that is something. I mean, I will say that if you're somebody who likes to kind of go back to questions and things like that, it sounds like you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah, there will be, from what we can see, that students will be able to flag in the sort of testing interface questions they want to go back to, and can go back and forth to questions, but it doesn't appear usually in an adaptive module like this. You can't go back from one module to another. You will usually be able to go within the module back and forth. But we don't know for sure yet. We're still waiting for the SAT to give us more instructions and information about the adaptive interface.
I guess the good news is, as I always tell students, everybody's in the same boat. This isn't just happening to you. This is happening to everybody. So
true. So
those challenges are probably going to be fairly universal, unless you're extremely lucky. So what about, like, what are colleges saying about it? I'm just kind of curious what you've heard. In all honesty, I haven't heard much, and I feel like my sort of best guess is that the colleges will sort of either take what the College Board gives them, or they'll go full UC and be like, go away. I could see that evolving over time. I mean, if they decide they don't like this test, the College Board risks losing more clients, so to speak. But I can see this also solving problems of test security and stuff like that the colleges also care about pretty deeply. So curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, you've hit on all of the big ones. The test security is a big one, and that has been a problem that's plagued the College Board for a number of years. We've seen large scale cancellations when a test gets leaked, a paper test. And what's great about a digital test is they find out there's been a leak 24 hours before the exam. They can just upload a new exam for everyone at the computer center. Also, the adaptive nature makes it so that it's harder to know if they're going to recycle tests. Different kids in the same room will have different tests versions and different questions. And so it does really begin to address security in all of its forms. And I think that's one of the major reasons why colleges will be actually in favor of this change. Now, in terms of whether or not they accept the scores also depends on validity. Do they find that these scores are actually valid indicators of how a student will do in college? Are they comparable to old school scores? How does that exactly work? And we're still waiting for information on that. And the College Board expects to publish some validity studies in November of 2023. So kind of a ways away here. We've got to wait for those validity studies. But those validity studies should tell us more and should tell the colleges more as well. And then the last thing I would say here is that in the pilot testing, there was a pilot test of this back in November. So a couple months ago, College Board had a bunch of students sit for this, kind of looked at how they performed, how they felt about it. And they actually they had educators at the College Board and sort of affiliates with the College Board sit in, take a look at the of the materials. And there were admissions officers from MIT, Yale, and USC on that board. And they indicated they were impressed with what they saw. And so there is an indicator that maybe there's going to be a little bit more acceptance of this than there was of that ACT announcement that came a number of years ago that they were going to change. And then everyone kind of freaked out about it. College Board tends to do a better job of courting the colleges, I've found in the past when it makes changes like this, giving them time to get on board, giving them lots of data and asking them questions ahead of time too.
Yeah, the College Board seems very PR savvy, and the ACT, I always picture all these statisticians in a room going, this is just how it's going to be. Like, it's just a very different feel. It doesn't mean the test is better or worse, but just the PR version of it.
Yes. I would definitely say the College Board is very slick when it comes to its image and its PR. They do quite a lot and have for a number of years to keep that shiny and bright.
Exactly. All right. So the last question: any advice for students or parents on how to navigate this period of change, especially as we're waiting for the details?
Yeah, and I think that's important. That point about we're waiting for the details. So the first thing I would say is, don't panic. There is no need to worry at this point. We are still a few years off from really understanding all of what's going to happen. Also, we're a few years off from the actual implementation of this. And we're going to see over the next 6 months, a lot of information coming out via webinars, papers, practice exams from the College Board. They generally do a very good job of getting that kind of material out to students, especially compared to the ACT. So really what I would just say is that if you are in the United States and you are a sophomore or older, just move on with your life. This will not affect you, so don't worry about it. And if you're a freshman, just hold tight for right now. Wait the next 6 to 12 months for more details to come out and then start to make your plans. There's no reason. I mean, all of us on the admissions and the testing side are deep in this right now. And we're going to do that work for you. And we'll be here to help you when the time comes. But there's no reason to really worry about this at this point yet.
All right. And I did think of one more question I'm curious of your opinion on. Is any of this driven by all the additional test optional schools, or did the College Board kind of have, I mean, I imagine the College Board had this in the pipeline anyway, because security issues have been going on for a long time and it's been well publicized. At the same time, they are losing market share, so to speak, right? Like,
yes,
or losing customers. I mean, I think they're both losing customers. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think you've hit both the two important parts. One is the security issue. We knew the SAT had come out and said, more than 5 years ago that they hoped within a 5-year period to have a digital SAT up and running. So that was before most of the big names we know of went test optional, University of Chicago, or the big push that we saw during COVID and during the pandemic, where places went test optional for the time being. So it was already in the works. They were sort of churning along. But what I also think is happening is, you're exactly right. Test optional is having an impact here. And I think you're right in that the market is smaller. There's a smaller group of students who are going to want to test or need to test as time moves forward. And the ACT and SAT are in a cutthroat battle to grab what is left. And I really think that this change is focused on students and student comfort in the exam. So they're doing all of these things that still make it a valid test. That still will be a test that colleges will accept in a test optional world, but saying, hey guys, we are the more comfortable test. We're shorter, we're digital. You get your test scores really quickly. You get your calculator all across the board. Passages are short. This is a really comfortable, easy test you can really just slide into. And they're really hoping that as the market shrinks, they're going to get a higher percentage of it and still maintain their dominance. With students.
Very interesting. Yeah, these may be nonprofits, but they are a business at the same time. So
absolutely.
Without a doubt. All right, Megan. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sally. And thanks for listening, everybody.
All right. So we will be back in just a few minutes, and then we're going to be welcoming Tara to talk financial aid when we return.